College football is weird. Like, it's honestly just weird. Last week, there was no life on offense. The defense was terrible out in Lexington. South Carolina found a way to own Mark Stoops. And now we're talking about this team going down to the wire with the number one program in the country. And yet somehow Georgia survives 13-12 over Kentucky. Welcome on into the SEC Unfiltered postgame show. He's Dave Shumate. I'm Cole Thompson, breaking down everything that we saw tonight at Kroger Field as the Bulldogs remain alive, the top-seeded program, and we have a lot to discuss. So real quickly, make sure that you hit subscribe and the ring notification down below because this is your number one source for all things SEC coverage moving forward. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Make sure that you're following us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. Follow Dave on Twitter at Mock10 Sports, me on Twitter at Mr. Cole Thompson. And to check out all of our great work, make sure that you visit secunfiltered.com. This postgame show is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app and use the promo code SECU for $20 off your very first purchase. We got games around the corner. Bryant-Denny Stadium is going to be rocking and rolling as now we have a top 10 bout between the Bulldogs and the Crimson Tide. Make sure that you go ahead and hit that subscribe and make sure that also you go ahead and hit code SECU on the Game Time app. Dude, what was that? Like, honestly, I have no idea what to make of this college football season. Weird things have happened all day. And real quickly, I don't want to hear anybody out there say, oh, well, week 3 is a boring snooze fest because there's not great games. Are you kidding me? Like, this was a defensive showcase of showcases, and ultimately, one touchdown was the difference, and one egregious play thinking that your offense could find a way to survive from Mark Stoops.
Yeah, this is, man, me and Cole, me and you were talking a little bit off air. Like, I mean, I think in the preview we talked about this game's traditionally just really kind of ugly, get through the game, probably quick game, not a lot of passing. Let's get through it, no injuries. Georgia usually wins. Maybe a 7-10-point game at the start of the fourth. They ended up winning about 15. This was different. This was Kentucky had a legit shot to win this game. Like, yeah. I mean, I would be lying to you, I think, if you were like, well, like in your head, did you really think that was going to happen? No, I always thought Georgia was going to win. But, I mean, Kentucky was there. I mean, again, they were just – I mean, their field goal kicker's pretty good. I mean, they weren't that far away from being able to give it up. Give it a last-second kick a chance. But, no, I mean, Georgia, the thing that stands out, just poor tackling across the board. They got out physical. They gave up 284 yards on the ground. I mean, total right there, 170 on the ground, 3.8 yards per attempt. But, I mean, I understand. Kentucky ran the football 45 times. But just 9 penalties, just a very sloppy game. And we've seen this from everybody in college football not named Texas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee, I feel like at this point now. I mean, unless I'm missing somebody. Like,
I mean, you're right. The other difference is that you look at Texas, they just feel like they're on a new level. Ole Miss, who have they really played to where you're going to watch them play down to the competition? Sure. And then also, you already mentioned it, this is where we're at. I think the crazy part about this game is that you saw last week as Lenore Sellers was able to get explosive plays consistently against this secondary. And Carson Beck did it. I mean, there was the one play with Dominic Lovett that we all thought potentially could have been a pick six. That was the momentum shift. Dominic Lovett, ball hits the ground. It looks like it doesn't. 60 yards the other way. They go ahead and they call it. But at that moment, that was the only time that really there was any spark on either side. Just great 3-and-out drives, a lot of slow momentum. You got a couple first downs, settled for some field goals. That was really it. But to me, the most important part of this game happened at the very last drive for Kentucky. You're in field goal. You're 7 yards away from being in field goal range for your kicker. You feel confident in the way that he has performed all night. And you punt. Like, to me, that's where this game really has to start. Because
I'm with you too. That's kind of, I think as a big underdog, you got to take some kind of risk.
It's not even that. It's that if you go for it on fourth down and you connect, regardless of what happens, you still have 3 more plays to get your kicker into better field goal range. You might end up scoring a touchdown. You might see your offense be able to hit their stride. There was so much more that you could do with those 3 extra plays. And then if not, your defense has been playing lights out all night against the Heisman favorite in Carson Beck. They've eliminated the ground game in both Branson Robinson and Trevor Etienne. The passing attack has been feeble at best. and you go punt and you ask your defense, hey, let's make sure that we hold them for three and out here.
We have to get three and out.
Get the ball back. And on top of getting the ball back, let's make sure that we get the ball back at worst field position and then have to march all the way down to do what we're already planning on doing. That was where I really lost it because it felt like at that point, Mark Stoops had been playing conservative all night, but you're the underdog. It is the home crowd. You're coming off of a horrible loss to Shane Beamer. They lose earlier today, and you punt? You punt with that much time left on the clock, and you allow Georgia to run down the clock?
Essentially milk the clock to give you no chance at that point. Because
that was the biggest thing, is that they gave them no chance in that game.
You essentially said what you said, Cole. By you punting, you're essentially telling your defense, boys, we need a 3 and out, or we're really not going to have much time left. I mean, the 2-minute warning clock gives you essentially another timeout. But I'm with you. You're this big of an underdog at home. It's not 4th and 15. I get that. That's kind of like, all right, man. It's almost, especially with Brock Vandagriff, it's going to be tough to complete. 4th and 8, you have something dialed up almost in your territory at 4th and 8 that you're kind of like, I feel like this is our best play right here. We can make something happen here if we can protect this. I'm with you. I thought that was a pretty passive, conservative call right there in Kentucky's role, in Kentucky's situation where they really had nothing to lose. Like,
Dave,
I was disappointed in that too.
Dave, think about this for 1 minute. Alex Rayner was 4-4 on field goals, 55 yards, 32 yards, 40 yards, 51 yards. You're 7 yards out from the 55-yard marker to where he just made it earlier. Why don't you go for it? Because again, what happens? It's a 4th down. Your defense playing wells. You immediately either get the ball back, they're at midfield, or you go get those 3 extra yards. You go get 3 more downs. You realize at this point that you get to get in better field goal range. You realize at this point you get to give your shot a better opportunity. There was no win here. Like, it just felt like, oh, I'm going to trust my defense to do what it's done all night. And this was finally the moment to strike. And this is where I understand where Kentucky fans are tonight. I understand where now you're sitting at 1-2, where clearly all you needed was one play to go ahead and get to 2-1, to get to 2-1 against the number 1 team in the country, where they marched into your backyard and you played up to their level. I think that's the part where a lot of people don't realize is that Georgia, as good as they are, they either played a little bit down to Kentucky's level, and Kentucky also played a little bit up to their level.
And I'll say this for Georgia. Georgia needs Michael Williams back. They need Warren Brinson back. They need Jordan Hall back. I mean, Carson Beck even got nicked up a little bit. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins got nicked up a little bit. Hell, Trevor Etienne went out for a little bit. I mean, Georgia is essentially. Georgia, Rodemaker went out for a while. Ratledge, Tate Ratledge is out. Like,
now we don't know his status moving forward.
Georgia's a bit beat up right now. Like, again, this wasn't just to get through it. Kirby and them are lying. I mean, I heard him in there. He was saying it's tough to get an SEC road win. I get it. He's right. It's hard to win in college football each week. And they didn't play well. I mean, they just didn't. But they're gonna have 2 weeks to go get better. Cole, you think people are you gonna overreact to that? Or are you gonna? What do you think?
What, at Georgia?
Yeah.
No, this has always been a close game. Last year it wasn't, but you also have to realize that there's one game per year where Georgia just does not get it together. Think back in 2022. They went to Columbia. They played against Missouri. It went down to the wire. Last year, they went to Auburn. They played down to the wire. This year, they're at Kroger Field. They're playing down to the wire. There's always that one game where you realize it just doesn't feel like you're able to separate. Whether it be the competition plays up to your level, whether you play down to theirs, there's miscommunication with the passing attack, the run game is feeble, the defense is allowing too many explosive plays, whatever the reason may be, you're talking about Georgia does this once per year, and you have a finite number of plays to attack, deliver that crushing blow. You have that moment to be able to give that punch, and if you don't do it, Georgia's is too much of a quality team to be able to play down to that competition for far too long. And that was the case. They get the late touchdown. They go ahead and take the lead, and you're winning by field goals. I was talking to some people during halftime, and we saw the score, and it was very close. And you're thinking, okay, if you come out, you get a good stop, you feel really confident, especially if you're Kentucky. And one person said, you can't win with field goals. what's going to happen is it'll be the fourth quarter, and you will allow Georgia to score that touchdown, and that will be the final score. Lo and behold, that was the case.
Yeah. Another thing I would say, you're probably going to see this on social media with Georgia fans. I feel like it's pretty regular outside of Todd Monken, but the complaints about Mike Bobo and the lack of creativeness. I saw there was the second half, there was no throw past 7 or 8 yards down the field. I don't know. Bobo, sometimes I'm with him sometimes, and then sometimes he makes me totally change my mind, and I'm with the Georgia fans a little bit like, what's going on, man? Like tonight, I thought all their formations were just so congested. Like, it was just like, you didn't spread them out at all. You kind of went and played their game. I don't know. If I was a Georgia fan, I'd be a little congested, a little worrisome about that as well. I mean, it's something that stood out.
You know what the crazy part is, Dave? Let me just read you off the stat sheet. Kentucky had more first downs. They were better on third down. They finished with more yards. They finished with a better completion percentage. They finished with more rushing yards. They finished with more rushing attempts. They averaged more yards per play, fewer penalties. They had one turnover, and they lose the game because of one team gets a touchdown, the other one doesn't. Like, that's it. Like, it didn't feel like one of those games that was very similar to what we saw last week at Boone Pickens, where it was down to the wire because of fundamental flaws with Arkansas. But every way that you push it, they were able to keep this thing interesting. They were able to make play after play after play. They were able to stop this defense from doing anything. They were able to stop this offense from making a good big run. It came down to a Branson Robinson touchdown, and it came down to you not being willing to go be aggressive on fourth down in your own territory, right at the 50-yard line. And to me, that's the most mind-boggling thing. You're down. You are the underdog. You already hit the under. And on top of that, you're going to hit the under when it comes to what the odds are. Go for it. Be aggressive. And you know what's really interesting? And just tell me if I'm wrong on this, Dave. It feels like in years past, maybe you would have seen Mark Stoops make that type of call. He would have been a little bit more aggressive because he realizes that he's playing for something more than just to go ahead and be a 7-5 team. He realizes that there is a little bit more optimism. There's something about this squad that's special. And he doesn't have that gusto anymore. It just felt like, oh, I'm getting paid my money regardless of what happens. We're going to hit the over on what is the number that we're supposed to be. I'm good. It's just going through the motions at this point.
Yeah, I hate it. Yeah, I know we talked about that a little bit. You're right. I was a little disappointed in that call. Maybe you're right. Maybe a couple of years ago, Mark Stoops does make the call to go for it. But I was like you. As a little no-brainer to me. Maybe I'm wrong. Hindsight's always 20/20, but still. Like, even if you didn't get it, I wouldn't have been upset. If you had a good play call, pass gets batted down, tip the cap to the defense, something like that. No, but Georgia, that'll be interesting. This is something Kirby's going to want, though, similar to how me and you we're talking earlier about what game was it? We were talking that would preview the of a lot to take from. Oh, Missouri, Eli Drinkwitz.
Yeah.
That's who it was in the Boston College game. Yeah, obviously Kirby would have loved to play better. But now they got 2 weeks to go get healthy. Maybe this is the early season wake-up call before they really get into the midst of their – I mean, we've all seen their road schedule. I mean, Ole Miss, Texas, Bama, and then – Tennessee at home, and I forget the other fourth road game. I think maybe Jacksonville.
Ole Miss?
Yeah, Jacksonville may count as it this year.
Florida. But who knows what that team is going to be. I mean, there may be conversations.
No, but you still got, like you said, those 3 tough road games. Maybe this is the time you needed that wake-up call a little bit. You had some guys out, squeaked out a win. You learned. This is going to feel like a loss to that program. Not into the world. I'm sure they'll be getting dragged. They're not going to be getting dragged through the mud. I saw someone was tweeting that. I think some people – understand it. They didn't play well. They won, but let's don't overreact. I think me and you talked about, can 2 things be true at once with the A&M Florida and immediate reaction? I think 2 things can be true here too. Like, hey, Georgia didn't play well, but again, Cole, we've seen it. Outside of 2 or 3 teams in college football this year, everyone's had their bad halves, their bad games, and they still won. I think you just chalk that one up to Georgia here. They just got to get healthy. That's really what I'd be honed in on if I was a Georgia fan and someone who follows the program hard.
Dave, here's my theory. What we saw last week by Kentucky was not the version of Kentucky we will see most weeks on Saturdays. We will see an aggressive defensive front. We will see a defense that's able to make plays. They're able to force 3 and outs. They're able to capitalize, not allow too many explosive plays. There are going to be some questions on offense. The offensive line still is just awful to watch. I mean, yes, you got a little bit of life at times with Kamagre Sumba on running the football. You had some bit of
game tonight.
You had little life. You had a couple of big time catches made by Dane Key, by Barry.
You were better than last week, but it couldn't have been much worse.
But at the same time, there is that middle ground of what we saw from Kentucky. There also is what we can see being the low for Georgia. Like, to me, this is the low for Georgia. You're playing down at the competition.
Yeah.
And also, if you're Georgia, you're looking at this and you're saying, we cannot have these type of performances in 2 weeks against Alabama. We can't have these type of performances in Austin, regardless if it's Quinn Ewers and now Arch Manning, 5 touchdowns against UTSA. I don't care what you say. If you're working in this offense and you're absolutely thriving, you can do it with a first-team unit against anybody. Can you do it when you're playing against Georgia? Absolutely. Can you handle the pressure? What about when you play against a team like Tennessee? I mean, you saw nothing from Nico Iamaleava tonight. You saw a lot from the Dylan Sampson performance that everyone was kind of waiting for. You still got Ole Miss. They've been playing well. I don't think that we're at that point of where we're saying that this is going to be UGA all the time. What I do believe is that this is the worst version of Georgia. And if you play this way against teams that are competing for a college football playoff spot, you're not going to get lucky. It's not that you got lucky. There were a bunch of plays that not only boasted well in your favor, but also you watched as Mark Stoops in Kentucky didn't capitalize on the opportunities. Texas will. Ole Miss will. Tennessee will. Alabama will. There's multiple reasons to believe that this is a performance that is that wake-up call. And I appreciate Kirby afterwards telling ESPN's Molly McGrath, we went in with hearing this narrative about what the SEC is, and they didn't realize that you can easily be susceptible to a loss. We did not play to our standard. And he also gave a kind of a testament to what Georgia is. I mean, Kentucky is. It's always a tough matchup with this team. The Wildcats know how to just play close against Kirby Smart.
Yeah, this overall, I mean, hell, I was thinking about it right here. I was reading this guy's comment. Cole, it's not even just on Twitter anymore, baby. It's even leaked into the chat room. Few truths in life. So Georgia struggles on offense. The Bobo hate train will roll into town, baby. Hey, it won't be the last time we see it either. If they don't win it all, there'll be some point they're complaining about Mike Bobo. Love him or hate him. Good dude, but I mean, I see their frustrations with him at times. Just lack of creativity. I saw someone mention Todd Monken scored 16-18 against Kentucky. I mean, in general, Todd Monken was someone Georgia fans didn't really complain about offensive coordinator-wise. But no, I don't think this is going to be the team you're going to see Georgia in 2 weeks. I think they're going to come out with a different edge. They're going to naturally be healthier. They don't play next week. They'll have time to get off their feet. Just a little bit of a bump in the road, but you know what? This bump in the road didn't give you a flat tire and give you an L in the loss column. So I think, again, like Boston College, Missouri, something Eli Drinkwitz, something Kirby Smart can take away and learn from. Again, not good things to work on if you ultimately want to reach your ultimate goals, but it's not the end of the world. Not the end of the world.
There are 2 truths to every situation. The first is that this version of Kentucky absolutely can hold its own against opponents that they face off against that are at their level. And if you probably
that team that plays up and down to competition, I think.
And if you played this way last week against South Carolina, who the hell knows what the final score would have been?
Yeah.
But also, the version that we saw tonight of Georgia, that might be a one and done. And again, they get it out of the way early. We saw it 2 years ago against Missouri when they traveled to Como. We saw it last year in week 4 when they played against Auburn. There's always that game that they just find a way to play down to the competition. And right now, you get a week to be able to rest, regroup, reprocess, go through the film, realize where the fundamental mistakes were, realize where you have to improve, and then you get to go travel to Bryant-Denny Stadium against an Alabama team that is feeling the momentum. And right now, this is still a major event. I called this the best game of the year on paper because of, again, until we see it truly happen, Alabama is still the standard in the SEC. They are. They are because of they have been the team that everyone has been trying to reach. Nick Saban's gone, but it doesn't feel like that aura or energy has been taking that spot out of the limelight because of, again, you look at the way they played today for 3.5 quarters against Wisconsin. That is the standard. So this is a major game for Georgia because if they want to take over the mantle as now the kings of the SEC, the standard of college football, they have to play on their A game. They get this one out of the way on the road. So I think if you are a Georgia fan, that's what you can appreciate. You knew this was going to be probably a tougher game than expected because of, again, the weather implications at the start of the game. They were going to play a factor. It didn't tonight in Lexington. You did see this team play close multiple times in the past against Mark Stoops. And sometimes when you get a defensive versus defensive bout, it ends up being who ends up having the right amount of talent to be able to capitalize late in games.
No, 100% agree. That's it. They got to keep chopping wood. They want to ultimately get there because, like you said, Texas, it looks like they're rolling this year. Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Georgia plays all three of them. So, and then you add Alabama in there. It's kind of in that next group, I think, as well. So, Georgia's got some work to do, but again, I think a lot of their work will be in the training room with our boy Ron Corson, the head trainer over there. Him getting some guys back healthy will help Georgia, help them get their mind right. I think kind of this is what I don't want to say that. It's very lazy narrative, lazy, easy, low-hanging fruit thing to say. This isn't what they needed. No, they didn't need a 1-point win over Kentucky with Kentucky.
Nobody wants a 1-point win.
No, nobody needed this. What Georgia would need is like a 28-3, 28-10 win maybe over Kentucky. We didn't play great, but it was never in question. This game was in question until the very end. So I wouldn't say it's what they need, but they can take a lot from it and learn from it. I'm not going to overreact. I think it is what it is. It's college football these days. It's tough. There's more distractions than ever in the world, not even just for 18 to 22-year-olds. So to get these guys' attention after, like you were saying, Cole, how bad Kentucky looked last week, I'm sure that was Kirby Smart's biggest challenge this week. It was like, hey, guys, like I know some of you haven't been here when we play these guys, but it's always a close game. You need to get focused. Like that's not really who they are, who they played against South Carolina last week that you've been seeing on film.
Dave, before we get on out of here, thoughts of Kentucky. It was a game that you feel confident that you played up to the level of competition, but does this team still have any momentum of what you saw tonight on offense that could be salvageable? Because I look at this offensive line, and that's where I have the most questions. It's Georgia. I get it. Georgia has one of the best defensive front sevens in college football, but you still got games against Texas. You still got games against Tennessee. Do you feel like that this is the best that you're going to get from this unit this year? And if that's the case, is there any hope that maybe 9-3 is possible, 8-4 is possible?
My thing is, we know with Kentucky, usually come about November, they don't have the top 40 that most teams have from a roster standpoint, 1 through 40. I know teams get 85 scholarships, but really most of your top 40 guys are who contribute week in, week out. Kentucky by November starts to fade just naturally, like a lot of the mid teams in the SEC to the back end of the teams in the SEC. So the depth's going to come in. I mean, I'm looking at their schedule now. You're asking me this. So they get Ohio this week. That should be just on paper. I'm giving them 2 wins. At Ole Miss, I don't feel great about that right now. Vanderbilt at home. Vanderbilt's good enough on a given day to beat them, certainly, for sure, with the way Kentucky plays offense at times. I know Vandy lost today. At Florida, it's a toss-up.
Who knows what Florida is?
Will Billy Napier even be there at that point? I don't know. You get Auburn at home. I mean, the over-under in that game may be 30. At Tennessee, I don't see you winning that. Murray State at home, sure, you will win that. At Texas, I don't. And then Louisville, Kentucky usually wins it. But I think Louisville may be a little better than Kentucky right now. So getting to 6, I don't know. You didn't directly ask 6, but that's kind of what I'm thinking after the South Carolina performance. They're going to be right there. I mean, they got to beat Ohio. I think they got to get Vandy, got to get Florida. Got to get 2 or 3 of that stretch of Vandy, Florida, and Auburn to have a chance. I mean, you're right. The offensive line is going to be key. They got to stay healthy. And I think they got to figure out an RB2 after Kongbe Sumo. Like, I think they got to find
Chip Trainum. That's the guy. They just got to hope that he gets back soon. Chip Trainum.
He's hurt, but whenever he gets back, if he does, if they slow him in, they need maybe the Patterson kid, who's a true freshman, to step up and play, but they're almost just riding Demi into the ground. And at some point, again, your depth isn't as good as most teams. It's going to fade late. I don't know. It's going to be injuries, and like you said, the improvement on the offensive line. I think Brock Vandagriff is what he is. I don't know. I still think Kentucky's on that fringe 5-6 win team.
The thing about Kentucky that I look at right now is that you know what you're going to get. You know what you're getting from the wide receivers. You know what you're getting from Brock Vandagriff. You know what you're getting from the defense. You know what you're getting from the offensive line. What you saw tonight was them probably playing a little bit above their level of competition, which, again, you want to see against top-ranked teams in college football, and you know that that's a good sign in the right direction. But also, you just sit here and you say to yourself, this is a team that has kind of shown its cards. We are who we are. Let's try and manage. You're right. When we talk about South Carolina last year, this was a team that just did not have the depth to be able to push the level of competition to where if you didn't improve, you were losing your starting job. That wasn't the case. That wasn't. Now it feels like that currently in Lexington. You don't have the depth to be able to say, we can turn to somebody else in the offensive line and we're going to be better off because of it. No, you're probably going to be worse. You can't turn to another wide receiver and say that they're going to step up. No, it's probably going to be worse. You can't turn to a quarterback, whether it be Vandergriff or Wimsat. You know it's probably going to be worse. So you are who you are at this point. Now it's about trying to figure out how do you make the rest of the season manageable to where maybe you get a few upset wins, maybe keep things interesting, and you're playing in at least a decent bowl game that shows that you are still trending in the right direction. Ultimately, my big feeling is that it's not that the days are numbered for Mark Stoops in terms of him being fired. I don't think he will. I think that would be egregious to think that Barnhart would fire him overnight. But I do believe that change could be happening sooner than expected, depending on what happens with the Iowa job. If he gets a phone call, I think he's leaving. And then ultimately, you did see today another coach that had coached in Kentucky take Oklahoma down to the wire. Maybe that's somebody that you make a first phone call to.
Yeah, John Summerall. Summerall would definitely get a call for sure for that job since he's coached there. The linebackers coach played there. He'd definitely be their first call once Stoops leaves, if he leaves.
Like, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure that you're following us on Twitter. Comment down below. What were your overall thoughts from Georgia's performance? What were your overall thoughts from Kentucky's performance? What does the direction look like for both these teams as Georgia heads in the bye week? Kentucky heads to play against Ohio. Make sure that you're following us on all the social media channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. Download the podcast version of the show. Follow Dave on Twitter at Mock10Sports. Follow me on Twitter at Mr. Cole Thompson. And to check out all of our great work, make sure that you visit SECUnfiltered.com. Sunday Fun Day, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central. We'll be breaking down everything that we saw in week 3 and a quick preview into week 4. But for Dave Shumate, I'm Cole Thompson. Bulldog Nation, Wildcat Country, peace.